Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about some monsters from the 5th generation, primarily their early/smaller monsters that kind of have a similar architect to them, I guess you could say. Primarily the newly introduced raptors, or bird wyverns, and these new lizard-like creatures. To begin with, we're going to actually talk about the Great Izuchi from Rise first, mostly because I have kind of a special monster to talk about in World. So, the Great Izuchi, it's fine. I think it's pretty decent. Fairly cool monster. I'd give it a B. Mostly due to the fact that it has like some neat color schemes to it. I think the use of orange and blue is actually pretty striking, and that giant claw at the end of its tail I find kind of neat. It's implemented in some cool ways for the weapon designs, and it does use it fairly effectively, I would say, in battle, doing things like slamming it down to the ground, swinging around like a giant scythe with that sickle tail, and more interestingly, being able to hook up onto the walls of nearby areas to do some projectile shooting with like spitting out these aqua ball things. The most unique aspect that was advertised with the Great Izuchi is the fact that it tends to hunt with two other smaller Izuchis, kind of doing these team attack-esque things. Mostly what's going on is that they hunt in unison. They'll each spit when the Great Izuchi spits. They'll all swing their tail when the Great Izuchi swings its tail. It's a fairly dynamic hunt, especially for early on. It's not at the same level for me like the Great Macau, but I do think it's a good introduction, a neatly introduced new monster. I think it's perfectly fine. I like it for what it is. Okay, so continuing with the whole bird wyvern aspect, we're gonna now jump back to Monster Hunter World, where we have two new bird wyverns that are early game monsters. The first one being the Kulu-Ya-Ku, or Kulu-Ya-Ku. There we go. That's how you Kulu-Ya-Ku. That's how you say it. A very interesting chicken bird looking creature. I say chicken just because it has very much this it's very much got the bird aspect to it, with that very prominent beak, feathers on the crest of its head and forearms, and it while the monster kind of looks and acts goofy, it has a fairly intelligent style of hunting in the fact that it will dig up rocks or jars, depending where you are, and use them as both a weapon and a way to defend itself, which can be pretty effective in the early game, thanks to how weak your weapons are starting off. They will bounce off quite frequently of the rock when the Kulu-Ya-Ku is using it to defend itself. I think the most memorable thing about the Kulu-Ya-Ku for me would have to be very much the Final Fantasy crossover, where it has the crystal and constantly gets bigger. Overall, though, it's an okay monster to me. I give it a C. Not a bad monster, but just not one I'm that big on. Its sandy colors are okay, but there's not a whole lot going on design-wise that really appeals super much to me or pops out in a great way. Moving on to the next bird wyvern in Monster Hunter World, that's a fairly smaller one, we have Tzitzi-Ya-Ku. Between the two, I think Tzitzi has a lot greater of a fan base, at least for how it tends to show up unexpectedly during certain hunts and kind of help or hinder you. The thing that makes Tzitzi really interesting and unique is these appendages on the top of its head. They're kind of like fins. Their main goal is, or the main purpose of them, is that they are used to create this flashing effect that is very good at stunning the hunter or other monsters. Now, it's pretty easy to skirt around this. It really only becomes an issue when you're hunting another monster, and then suddenly Tzitzi comes out of nowhere and catches you off guard, especially since it's in the Coral Highlands, which is a very bright and has a lot of white to it, and the way you can tell the flashing is due to this white on the ground, and if you aren't paying enough attention, it's easy to miss. Tzitzi's design appeals to me more. I like the different blues it has very much. Blue is a really nice dynamic color, and as such, I think it appeals to me much more. Not to mention there's this little iridescence to it that I think is really neat. I would give Tzitzi a B as well. It's a shame it hasn't come back yet. I would like to see it in future games because I think the whole flashing to stun monsters could be a really fun effect to continue on. It's one of those few small monsters that can genuinely have just this kind of non-turf war, but just effect on a battle or a hunt that's going on, even though it's not a larger monster when we think of like invading monsters such as Devil Joe, Basil Juice, and Crimson Valstrax. Now, the other small early game monsters that were introduced are very lizard form, and to begin with, we have, I think what you could say lovingly, the easiest monster in the entire series, that being the Great Jagras. The Great Jagras is your definition of a large lizard. It has very much these green and yellow scales that I think actually work very effectively. It's a striking design and color scheme that complements the creature very well. It has very much with these long scales that kind of hang down as hairs. Makes me think very much like that of the spines of iguanas. And lastly, this creature has quite the appetite. It's quite the sight to watch a Great Jagras just full-on swallow a whole Aptonoth, which will even change the way this thing fights. It'll like start rolling, has a bigger radius when it rolls, it'll shoot out like stomach bile. It's quite disgusting in that regard, but very memorable. It's not a difficult hunt at all. This is very, very much a beginner's monster, and I would argue a way easier monster than even like the Velocidrome lines. It has very few attacks that are incredibly well telegraphed, but are also extremely easy to dodge. It's not an engaging monster to hunt, but I think it makes up for that with its own personality. Like I said, this thing has quite the appetite. I think it has a very good design and striking colors. I think it has its own charm. It's quite a shame this one didn't show up in Monster Hunter Stories 2, but Kulu-Ya-Ku did. But hey, Stories 2 made some weird choices all around, like Tetsukabra being a monster, but not a Monstie. That was very disappointing. Because I think the monster is very charming, and I do enjoy it, especially since this is the first time there's really been a quadruped lizard that you had as an early monster. I give it a B. I quite enjoy Great Jagras. However, it's nothing compared to its cousin. Going all the way down to the Rotten Vale, you have the Great Girros. Now, when capturing footage, I couldn't find any introduction video for Great Girros. It's been a while since I've gotten to this point again when playing Monster Hunter World from the start, so I guess there just isn't an introduction video for it, which is a shame because I think of Great Girros as the monster who actually hunts with its pack more effectively than the Great Izuchi. Mostly this comes down to the Great Girros will do this roar, and when it does that roar, it's actually like calling forth its little minions, and in doing so, they will do different attacks that will be indicated by what the Girros wants to do. Mostly, it's going to be them jumping and biting at you. I really like the biting animation with these guys, by the way, because their fangs start getting this glow up thanks to the paralyzing toxin that's going through them. And the Great Girros will use that quite well to its advantage of having the minions attack you first, hoping to paralyze you, and then it comes in for a pretty strong, devastating hit, particularly in the early game. And especially since the Rotten Vale, you have, of course, the miasma that is constantly eating away your health unless you're wearing specific armor or have good items with you. I think the Great Girros has a fantastic design. It's like this cobra lizard. Great uses of black and yellow. There's even a hint of red under its hood when it does its roar. Really awesome creature, and I don't know, maybe a bit underrated. It's pretty easy to forget since it is a smaller monster when you reach it and the Rotten Vale. And the Rotten Vale, you already have some pretty notable standouts, even in low rank, what with Rotoban and a Dogron, who is very much a apex monster at that time of the game of that area. And then of course once you get into high rank, it's completely overshadowed and forgotten when you have an Elder Dragon in the mix. But I really like Great Girros. It's one of my favorites, honestly, in the game, and it's not the most dynamic in terms of hunt, but I think it's engaging enough where it can kind of keep you on your toes. I love its design, and I'd love to see this thing come back again, even though I know that might be kind of difficult since the Rotten Vale is highly specialized. I give Great Girros an A, 100%. Cool ass monster. Now we're gonna end this video with the last monster of something I haven't done yet, but that's talking about a high rank monster. World is a fairly easy game, so I've gotten to the high rank a few times, and I think the high rank is a lot more better balanced. I'm not really good when it comes to Master / G rank, as I don't enjoy hunting the monsters a third time around, and the hunts just start getting a little bit more, dragged on, I guess would be the correct way of putting it. But high rank is still quite an appeal to me, and as such, I've hunted Dodogama quite a few times. Mostly because World lacks anything in terms of a lot of good weapon design. It's got the worst weapon design as a grand total compared to any other Monster Hunter game in the series so far, and as such, I went for its armor. But Dodogama is an extremely charming personality-based creature. It is once again one of these lizards, the last of these 3 lizard-based small monsters, and it is found in the high-rank only map, the Elder Recess. The big thing with Dodogama, aside from having, again, lovely blue scales and this massive underbite, is that it's all about eating rocks. It loves eating its rocks. And it actually uses these rocks pretty effectively in hunting, or at least in terms of defending itself. Similar to like that of Uragan, who is also found in the same area, the rocks from Dodogama can explode, but opposite of Uragan, these ones explode way more. Dodogama will like rush you, and it will shoot off all these different blasting rocks in different ways that can cause you to kind of stir up the way you're gonna take it on. It's not an extremely difficult hunt, it's not a complicated hunt, but it's engaging enough to keep you on your toes, which I appreciate. And I think Dodogama just has like these really tiny eyes with that massive underbite is so cute and such a massive, charming design choice. It's easily an A for me. I would like to see it return. I would like to see it get introduced in a low rank for one. That would be kind of a very, very interesting low rank monster to have as a pretty early monster in a like volcanic area who is also using Blast Blight in a pretty effective way, I might add. I also really like how like its chin glows when you can tell it has stones in its body and it's gonna spit them out at you. Also, much like with all of World's monsters, I'd like to see them return and have proper weapon designs for those who didn't get it, for monsters like Kulu-Ya-Ku, Tzitzi-Ya-Ku, Great Jagras, Puke, like all these monsters deserve some type of better love for their weapons. Alright, so that concludes this video. I'll be back. Sorry it took me quite some time, just a lot of stuff's been going on. And we'll talk either about some more monsters, or maybe we'll talk about some equipment again. Enjoy your October and spooky season, and I'll catch you all next time.